What's up, guys? It's Rey-Jay back with another video. And in this one, I want to break down what's happening with SPY, Tesla, Nvda, the QQQ, and a couple of other tickers. I'm also going to talk about why tomorrow is going to be a very important day as we have the PPI data report coming out, not to mention soon to be President Trump, who's going to be ringing the bell of the New York Stock Exchange. So I'll talk about all of this in just a couple of minutes. Just know that I am not a financial planner, so take nothing I say as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out my Moomoo link. If you deposit $100, you're guaranteed 5 free stocks. If you deposit $1,000, you're guaranteed 15 in total, not to mention an 8.1% APY on invested cash. The offer ends very soon in just about 2.5 weeks. Anyways, the market saw a very, very nice run today. We started off very, very weak yesterday. The market got this big sell-off very close to our 50 EMA for SPY. And then we were at 602 only to see a big rebound back up to about the 608.5 area of resistance back inside of this chop zone right here between 606 and 609. And we're now likely going to continue to stay in that range for some time. And we'll see if we could try to break past 609 to make new all-time highs. I believe that could happen in the future, but tomorrow could be a little bit of an anomaly because it depends on some data and factors like that. That's why I want to talk about some data first and what's happening with Trump ringing the bell. I'll be talking about that first before I break down these charts. But that's the first thing on a lot of people's minds, what's happening with tomorrow. So tomorrow before the stock market opens, okay, at the New York Stock Exchange, Donald Trump is going to be there, and he's going to be ringing the opening bell for tomorrow. So he is known for causing the market to pump a lot, at least historically. We'll see if he gives some kind of speech or something if this has somewhat of an effect on the markets. So just be prepared for that just to be safe. However, when it comes to data, that's going to have a bigger effect on the markets. So today, for example, we had CPI data come out, and you guys could see how the market responded. SPY got this very, very big move. And then tomorrow, we also have PPI data, so it's also going to be affecting us in how we end up moving. So today, we saw a lot of stocks like Google leading the way up, a lot of big tech stocks pumping. We saw Netflix pumping, Google, Meta, Nvda, Amzn, not to mention like Tesla continuing to run. The majority of other stocks that they were quite flat with some red, but I just want to say big tech continued to push. That's when we saw the Nasdaq and the QQQ continuing to break out. Even the S&P 500 helped to get lifted by this, so we're still seeing a lot of bulls stepping in, and they have the bigger edge at least thus far. As far as CPI data goes, just to start things off, all the data was very close to expectations. Just know that core CPI month over month and year over year were at 0.3 and 3.3%. Basically, everything was aligned with expectations and also the same as before. And then for all items CPI, month over month for the month of November was at 0.3%, aligned with expectations. And then year over year for all items was at 2.7%, a slight increase. So this is what CPI looked like, right? We had core CPI that was the same as before. This is what we were expecting. And then for all items CPI, we saw a slight increase. This is no surprise. The market was expecting that as well. And thus far, the market saw a more positive reaction. So that's why the market saw a nice rebound. They used this as the catalyst to push things back up. And so far, the market's holding up quite nicely. So what's happening for tomorrow? What data is going to be coming out? Well, tomorrow is going to be Thursday, December 12th, 2024. Please note that 1 hour before the market ends up opening, we have the PPI data report coming out. PPI is the producer price index. It's very similar to CPI, except the main difference is the fact that it's going to be on the producer or the wholesale side. So for PPI, just know on a month-over-month basis, we're expecting 0.2 to 0.3%, almost the same as before. And for core PPI month-over-month, we're expecting 0.2 to 0.3%, the same thing as before. And then going down here, we have PPI year over year. I'm sorry, we have core PPI year over year for November. We're expecting this to be slightly up to about 3.2%. That's almost the same as before, just slightly above. And then the biggest increase we're expecting is PPI year over year. We're expecting 2.6%, a slight increase by 0.2%. All right, so that's what we're expecting. We also have initial jobless claims expecting 220 to 225,000 of them. And that's all we're seeing, at least for the markets, at least going into tomorrow. So what do I think about PPI? I think that most likely core PPI is going to be aligned with expectations, but all items PPI could be close to expectations, but somewhat showing signs of an increase because of what happened with CPI. So I think it's going to be resembling CPI, but hopefully the numbers are decent. There's a good chance the market could continue to run if that ends up being the case. Besides that, there's not really anything else that's coming out, at least for the markets. Now, for earnings, okay, just know that we have Adobe announcing its earnings tonight. And then for tomorrow, we have Costco announcing their earnings. We'll see what that leads to. Unfortunately for Adobe, the share price is currently down because earnings have not been that good for them. So Profitability was at 1.68 billion or $3.75 a share, at least for the last 3 months. And then their adjusted EPS was at $4.81. That was above expectations. Revenue was up 11% to about 5.61 billion. That's also above expectations. And their first quarter for the fiscal 2025 is quite strong. They have strong earnings expectations for that. But the reason why the share price is down is because of this. For the fiscal year, for 2024 as a whole, okay, we're expecting revenue to be between $23.3 to $23.5 billion, missing the $23.8 billion expectation from analysts. Also, for adjusted EPS, we're expecting $20.20 to $20.50 for their EPS. That's the range, compared to about $20.52, which is what analysts are expecting. So that's also below expectations. So despite the fact that earnings were decent, unfortunately, their outlook missed estimations, and that's why the share price is down for Adobe. With that being said, the last thing I'm going to go over is this. Right now, the market's neutral, getting closer to greed. I think that's making up the majority of sentiment. Momentum is also extremely greedy as there are more buyers stepping in. The put to call option ratio is currently at extreme greed. That's making up the majority of sentiment. And volatility is very, very neutral for now. We're still stuck in the middle, so we'll have to see if this shifts or not, depending on what the VIX ends up doing. So what do I see for tomorrow? What is my prediction, at least thus far? I think the market has more upside potential after this big green bar. Generally, when you see big green bars like that, we do like to continue to go higher. There's going to be a small dip coming right here to possibly test this breakout area close to the 606 area. So I do expect 605.5 to 606 to be retested, at least maybe as we get very close to PPI's release. And then once PPI comes out, we'll see what kind of reaction we get depending on the data. If PPI is too hot and we get a big rug pull, we could return back down to 603 if 605 fails us. But if we hold 606, we could try to bounce and make our way back up to 609. And then also with Trump ringing the bell for the New York Stock Exchange, that could also have somewhat of an effect. We'll see about that. We'll see if he says anything. That could have a bigger effect. So we'll see about that. But for now, I do anticipate a small dip that could be coming to 606 to 605.6 in that range. And hopefully we get a big bounce and we attempt to go higher because we're about to get a bullish cross in the PPO. And generally, these big green bars do lead to a dip and a bounce and a continuation to all-time highs. I find that to be very probable for SPY, so I'm hoping we do see a big bounce to all-time highs and we continue this run. But that's going to depend on the PPI data coming out for tomorrow and what Trump ends up saying about market open. And hopefully the market kind of dips and bounces from here. After this little retest, we try to make our way back up to 609 is the most likely possibility as the charts remain more bullish. For ES became short of all-time highs, and we're going to dip right here. So look for an attempt to get back up to back down to about 60.74. So 60.74 to 60.80 could be coming for a small dip, and we'll see if we bounce off of that to make our way back up to about 6100. Depending on the data, so there might be a small dip in the morning. Then once PPI comes out, we either bounce back up to 6100, or we could get a rug pull back down to about 60.60. But look for a small dip first, and we'll see if we get a bounce or not. This also depends on Trump, but I'm hoping that we get a dip and a bounce is the most likely possibility because we're nearing a bullish cross in the PPO right here. And we have these big green bars forming, which generally suggests more upside is going to be in the works. So look for a dip to 60.80, then a bounce back up to 6100 plus as the most likely possibility. We'll see about that just to be safe. As far as Nvda goes, you could argue there's a slanted inverse head and shoulders, but just know this, we are looking quite decent on the 4-hour, which is what I talked about yesterday. CPI helped us launch higher, and plus the fact that the news is kind of like the news is not as significant now. It's not as, I would say, fearful because of what's happening with the probe. The probe news has been going on for a while, and that's kind of like cooling off. So if we look at 140 as our resistance and we break past that, we're looking for 142 as our next target. If we reject off 139, we're looking for a dip back down to 137. This chart is favoring upside because of the bullish cross in the PPO and the fact that it wants to go up to about this imbalance towards 142. So I favor upside a bit more for Nvda. Now, it depends on PPI, of course, and what Trump ends up saying. However, but I still think the technicals look quite good, and this does favor a little bit more upside as long as we try to break past 140. Bitcoin looks a bit more bullish, but we're approaching resistance around 102. We'll see if we get a small dip here to retest 100.5, and if we bounce to get back up to 102,000. So we'll see how it goes. But overall, it is still bullish. It still should continue this uptrend as we have a nice double bottom. I think we're holding up very, very nicely. For others out there, we have Tesla. Tesla is an absolute monster, continuing to break out right here. We're going to be looking for a test of 430 tomorrow. If that breaks, we're most likely heading for 435, then eventually 440 is our targets. And if we get above the 440s, I think 450 is coming. So there's no stop in sight. And just know that I can't really go over previous levels because this is making new all-time highs. So we're in new territory for Tesla. We'll have to see how well we hold above 430, but there is potential for us to try to keep going and make its way up even higher. Now, with Trump coming out and giving a possible speech or even ringing the bell tomorrow, that could be more positive for Tesla because of the deregulating that's going on during his administration to help improve FSD. So that's, the market could be very optimistic with that, at least for Tesla. Some stocks like that in particular could do really well. And we look very bullish going into tomorrow. As long as we don't lose 420 and then 414, the previous all-time high, we're favoring upside. I think the chart is favoring and wants to go up to the 430s and eventually get closer to 440. There's a lot of momentum right here, and we look very, very bullish. There's a good chance that tomorrow, it also depends on PPI, but we look quite good. For NQ, it's the same thing. I would like to see this cool back a little bit more to about 21,710 or so. If 21,750 fails us, we could be looking for a lower move to about the 21,700s, but then we should bounce after that and make our move back up towards 22,000. The reason for that is because we have this imbalance down here and previous resistance becoming support. So it could be a dip and a bounce off 21,700. I'm hoping we do see a little retracement and a move back up. Why? Because the share price is showing some signs of trying to dip just a bit. But then it all depends on PPI and what Trump ends up saying. I still am more optimistic because of the big green bars that are forming, which tend to have a lot of momentum associated with them. So there's most definitely potential in that because of that. For the QQQ, we look quite good. We have this resistance at 530. There might be a dip back down to about the 527.8 area. Completely healthy, guys. And then we could bounce off that. The PPO is turning bullish. We're getting more volume in. And this big green bar could push us higher for a dip and a bounce. And we'll see if we break past 530. If that's the case, we could be going for 532, then 535. Look for a dip and a bounce, and we'll see what happens with tech, not to mention the news coming out for tomorrow, depending on the data. Now, Apple pumped all the way up to 250 only to reject, so look for a small dip to retest to 245. 244 to 245, if we hold that on Apple, we could be bouncing back up to 248. If we lose this, we turn back down. So there's a little bit of weakness in Apple because of that, but I think we're going to be testing 245 to 244. Let's see if we bounce off that to make our move back up to 248 or above. So give this some time to develop, and we'll see how things end up going. So keep that in mind. We'll see what happens with our data, but we're doing a good job at least thus far. For Netflix, we're on a very, very nice uptrend at least thus far. And we could be looking for a bigger move for essentially this 940 area. If that breaks, we're looking for 945 to 950 is our targets. If you reject here, I think that there's going to be a risk of us coming down to 933. So if that fails us, we're looking for essentially 930, not to mention 921. So the 4-hour looks more bullish. I think there's a good chance we try to continue to go higher. And we're going to be looking for essentially 942, then eventually 945 is our targets. Netflix is more bullish as we came back up to build this imbalance. We talked about as long as we're above our 20 EMA, the share price is bullish. And overall, we are still looking quite good as we get close to the mid 940s. So I see some more upside potential right here. For MSTR, we have a nice looking base that's forming around 354. And we have this resistance at 420, so I think we could be pushing for 420. If that breaks, this imbalance will take us even higher for that 440 target. It looks bullish right now as we got a nice double bottom. So I think that this could try to push higher for that 430 target heading into tomorrow. Now, of course, it depends on PPI and what happens with Trump, but it still looks more bullish. Celsius or CELH is looking quite decent. Look for a small dip here. It could dip a little bit lower. We are technically below 30, so it could come down to about 29.22. If not, all the way down to the imbalance around this 28.3 area. And we'll have to see if we bounce or not off of this. So look for a dip and a bounce as the most likely possibility, and then we'll have to see what happens at least moving forward. However, I just want to call out the possibility that this could still bounce later on. We might be in part on a dip right now before we see that big move. So overall, give this a little bit more time to progress. With that being said, guys, look for a dip and a bounce. We could be retesting 29.22 to about 28.4 before we try to bounce and give it some time. For Supermicro, we have a little divergence right here. We're on a bit of a downtrend. Look at this resistance at 38.6 and 40.91. If we reject here and we can't bounce higher, we're looking for a move down closer to about this support down here around this 36 area. So I think we could be approaching 36 before we see some buyers defend. If not, we could be dipping closer to about the 32 zone. So look for a small dip before it tries to bounce, at least for now. For Palantir, We're range bound right here. We'll have to see if we hold above 72.22. If that fails us, we're looking for 70. If this holds, we could be trying to rebound for 74. My guts tells me that 74 is most likely coming. There's going to be a little bit of upside that's pending from here. For Rivian's on a bit of a downtrend here, but we're holding support right here at our 20 EMA. If we lose this support, we're looking for a dip back down to where this gap is around 13. If we hold this 20 EMA at 13.5, I'm looking for a rebound back up to about 14.25. So let's just see if this holds. It might try to rebound here. I'm hoping it does. This depends on our data for tomorrow, but there is potential for us to try to rebound. For SoFi, this looks more bullish as we're trying to break out to this imbalance. As long as we don't lose 15.68, we're favoring a move higher for about 16.18. And if we end up losing 15.5, we turn back down. I think that we could dip here and try to bounce. And as long as we don't lose, as long as we break past 16, I'm going to be looking for 16.25 as our target. So I think there's a chance that this tries to rebound. This depends on the data and such, but we look pretty good. On the IWM Russell 2000, we're still stuck within this channel, going back and forth and back and forth. So I think the odds favor this continuing. Might be a dip tomorrow morning back down to about 237 before it tries to bounce. Until we break out of this to turn bullish, we're just going to remain in this consolidation phase, stuck in this channel. So give it some more time to develop. We're basically stuck between 236 and 240. Until we break 240, we still remain range bound. For AMD, we're trying to bounce now, so there's a good chance it tries to rebound as long as we get back above 130. I'm looking for an attempt to get back up to 133. If we lose 126, we're looking for a dip back down to 123. I think this is favoring essentially 133. Now, we'll see if we end up breaking 130 or not, but I see some upside potential in this. If we break the resistance, there's going to be more upside, and just keep in mind that this has potential. I also think that AMD could push higher. I think that this depends on our data tomorrow, but there is potential on the chart. For ARM, we look more bullish after getting a big bounce after CPI. Nice little rebound. We're actually making higher highs and higher lows. So we're going to be looking for an attempt to get up to 145. If that breaks, we're looking for essentially 146.8. So there's more upside potential. For coin, we have more upside here. We're going to be looking for an attempt to get back up towards that 325 area. As long as we don't lose 312, I'm favoring upside for 320 and then 325. For Amazon, we look more bullish, but there is some tough resistance at this 230 area, so be careful with this range right here. If we lose 229, which is where we have previous support, I think that this could dip all the way down to like 227 if that does fail us. But as long as we kind of like dip to 229 and bounce, I think there's a possibility Amazon tries to go higher after a very bullish green bar. So a dip and a bounce is very possible, and move back up to 232, then 235 becomes probable. Meta might dip back down to the breakout area. So if you look at where this level was, we broke out from right over here. I think we're doing a pretty good job. We might retest the breakout area at 628, and we'll see if we get a bounce off that back up to 636. So give it some time. Look for that retest of 628, and we'll see how it goes. For Microsoft, run a nice uptrend, but look for a potential dip right here towards 448. We might be tipping a little bit lower towards that area. And we'll see if we get a bounce off of that, start pushing higher, back above 450. So I expect a small dip and a bounce is the most likely possibility. This also depends on our data for tomorrow, of course. So we'll see if we get that bounce for a much bigger move. For Google, we remain a lot more bullish. We're looking for an attempt to get back up to 200. We'll see if that breaks or not, so give it some time. For GJT, we look more bullish. We have a nice double bottom here with the bullish divergence. This might make a big move tomorrow, depending on what happens with Trump ringing the bell. So we'll see if we break past 37. If that's the case, we easily go up to 40. So this can make a very, very nice move. For others out there, we have the VIX. The VIX is dipping here, so it still has this gap to fill. If this does continue to reject and we don't get back above 13.8, the odds do favor us coming down to fill that gap. That could basically suggest that the market has more upside causing that to happen. The 10-year is trying to break out right here. If this pushes more, that could be, it might not affect the market too much. The dollar is also kind of flat here, not really doing much either. But I do want to call out the possibility of the head and shoulders we were talking about. There's a little bit of weakness here, so we'll see if the dollar comes down to about 106.3. But once again, it's not really affecting the market too much. So my view of the market is this. There's some tickers that are very strong, like Tesla, trying to break out. We're seeing a big squeeze that's perpetuating. And then for SPY, there could be a small dip in the morning, like I said before, but then we'll see if we get a nice bounce off this support right here around the 606 to 605.5 area. There might be a small dip, then we'll see if we get a bounce. This is going to depend once again on what happens with PPI data. Hopefully the data is decent. That's what I think is very probable. And then whatever happens with Trump ringing the bell. So please keep those two catalysts in mind for market open for tomorrow. We'll see what happens. Obviously, I'm not a fortune teller. I can't predict or promise anything with 100% accuracy. But I'll tell you this, guys, there's a good chance the market still has buyers who are with a much bigger edge. It took the bears a long time to get the market to dip, like 2 full trading days, and then within one day, the market just got bought back up, back near all-time highs. So it just goes to show how strong the bulls are and how they have a bigger edge in this market. With that being said, I thank you all so much for listening. I hope you guys have an absolutely fantastic rest of your days, nights, or evenings, wherever you guys are around the world. And I'm going to be back tomorrow before market open to talk about what happens with the PPI report and with Trump ringing the bell. So we'll see what that leads to. Hopefully we see more volatility and we see a nice move. And I hope you guys are ready to see some nice trades to be made from those points and beyond. So thank you for listening. Have a good day, guys. I'll see you guys very soon, and peace out.